Welcome to the Rustic Garden Homestead. This video is all about growing leafy greens, your lettuces, spinach, arugula. Going to take you from direct seeding all the way through harvest, so we'll cover all the steps. This is some of my loose leaf lettuce. This went in around July 15th. It was protected with shade cloth. It's ready to be harvested. We'll get to that at the end of the video. And we're basically just going to cut it off, leave the roots in the ground, and leaves will come back. First thing you need to know is that your leafy greens that I'm talking about today can take a frost. The leaves can freeze. Your leafy greens are perfect to grow from really midsummer into fall, even early winter in some areas. If you want to subscribe and follow me, I'll be doing a video on how to extend the season through the winter and grow your leafy greens through the winter. These are also perfect to grow in the spring, late winter into early spring into later spring. So you can follow this video really any time of the year. So let's get started with really direct seeding and talking a little bit about what your leafy greens need. Today is September 22nd. These seeds were sown on September 9th, so it's been about 14 days. Now, two ways to grow. Greater spacing for full size lettuces, spinach, etc., or closer together for cut and come again, and you will be cutting those leaves earlier. Generally speaking, spacing about 2 to 4 inches apart, that's spinach right in there, 2 to 4 inches apart for cut and come again spinach or your leafy greens. If we're getting to something where I'm going to want to grow the lettuce to full size, you're really talking about 6 to 8 inches of spacing in between the plants in the row. And then, I don't know, 6, 8 inches, 10 inches between the rows. You don't have to worry that much about it. But if you want it to come to full size, 6 to 8 inches of spacing both ways. If you're doing it as cut and come again, 2 to 4 inches both ways in the rows and the spacing between the rows. That's going to be plenty of greens. So spinach and all these plants too, like sometimes you'll see 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, just covered. Just a 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch deep, any of these seeds work really fine. What I do recommend is when you're planting your seeds, put in at least 2 lettuce seeds, 2 spinach seeds. You don't want to be waiting around for a seed that's not going to germinate. So put in multiple seeds, and when these guys get to about 1 inch tall, like there's only one there, that's great. There's 3 right in there. When they get to about 1 inch tall, I will thin them down. The lettuce in this row, spaced with that 6, 8 inches in between, I want them to grow to full size. And then we work our way down. There's also endive, which is a delicious green. They're a little bit more planted more closely together. I will be cutting them when they are smaller. Endive gets really large. It spreads out in a space like here. So you definitely want 8 inches on both sides and 8 inches between them if you want to grow a full-size head of endive. I will thin these down to 1 or 2 plants. Anytime that I'm growing it as cut and come again, and all that means is I'm cutting it as younger leaves, younger greens. I just cut the leaves off, leave the roots in the ground, and the plants will grow back. So you can have 1 or 2, even 3 plants per planting hole because you're cutting the greens a lot sooner. When you want them to get to full size, you want to thin them down to a single plant. Going from early September here in Maryland when the ground is warmer, these germinate really quickly. If you were doing this from early spring, these could take 7, 10, 14 days to actually germinate. But because the soil is warm, the air temperature is warm, these germinated really quickly. 14 days later, you have nice seedlings going. You can grow your leafy greens in vertical towers. These are Greenstalk Garden vertical towers. I'm affiliated with them. It's a great way to grow. In a little 2 foot by 2 foot space, you can put in a vertical tower that has 5 levels, 6 pockets. That's 30 plants you can get in there. And I have bib lettuce, kale, endive, romaine, all kinds of different lettuces in here. It's a really nice way to grow. You can direct seed into here. Again, I put in 1, 2, or 3 seeds thinned down to a single plant. You're going to want to be growing these usually for a bigger size than cut and come again, but you could certainly do that. You can also put transplants in, but you can grow directly in the ground wherever you have space, or these vertical towers work really well. This tower was set up, let me just get the date right, about the first week of August. So they've grown nicely, and you can see how quickly they start growing. Some of these were transplants, some of these were direct seeding, but you can plant your leafy greens in August here in Maryland. Use that warmth of the soil to your advantage to get really nice growth, and then when they get to size, rather than bolting, your leafy greens will bolt. They'll send out a flower stalk up the middle, the flavor changes, When they get a little bit more mature, the soil's really warm, the roots are warm, the ambient temperature is warm, they bolt. But because we started these in August, the fall temperatures here in Maryland have come on. It's about 75-degree days, 55-degree nights. These are going to grow nice and slowly. They're going to have wonderful flavor, and they're going to be to a nice size throughout the fall. Again, just remember, these can take a frost. The leaves can freeze through. During the day, they'll defrost, and they'll be perfectly fine. So you're not really worried about light frosts because these plants can handle it. Here's another space where I'm growing endive and leafy greens. And notice the spacing, in some cases 4 inches apart, some cases 6-8 inches apart. We don't need to over worry about that because you can harvest these plants at really any size. Like these leaves are delicious right now. You wouldn't want to do that because you're not going to get a whole lot. So as this whole space begins to fill in, I might harvest every other plant, reduce leaves from the outside, allow the airflow to still get through there, but I'm harvesting the leaves, managing the size of the plants, have a nice deep root system in there. We'll be talking about fertilizing shortly. You don't have to do a whole lot. You can just use the soil that you have and use a water soluble to get them off to a great start. But you can manage your leafy greens really however you want. Cut them as small as you want. If they're going to be small, really closely together. Like you could just do a whole row and maybe their seeds are just 1 inch apart and you're always trimming them when they get to about 2 inches. So I just want to impress upon you that the spacing is more important when you want to grow a full-size head of endive or your lettuces or spinach. You'll need more spacing. Otherwise, cut the lettuce and the greens as you wish. Let's start with putting in some transplants and then we'll do some direct seeding. This is my own compost. Please check out my videos on composting. This is the best way to garden. It's free. It's what your plants need. It's going to give them moisture, nutrients, and best of all, like I was saying, it costs you nothing. You're going to save a lot of money this way. It's really easy to do. The hardest thing is just really getting started. To set up the space, again, 2 to 4 inches apart if you're going to do cut and come again leafy greens, and then 6, 8, 10 inches if you're going to grow these to fuller size. We will put these in as if I want them to get a little bit larger, so that'll be about 8 inches. This is about 3 feet apart. So we're going to put one right here, another one over there. And to set it up, you know, a big handful of compost right where the transplants are going to go. And then I'm just going to loosen up the soil. If you don't have compost, you could put in some organic granular fertilizer here, some old potatoes, if you want. But most importantly, you just want a nice loose base for the transplants to go in. We're going to water these in with a water-soluble fertilizer at this point. When you put in the seeds, you want to wait till your seedlings get to about this size and then just hit them with the water-soluble fertilizer. That's going to give them plenty of nitrogen, and that's all they really need. When you're doing this August into the fall, through fall into the winter, there's usually enough nutrients. Your leafy greens are like 80–90% water, so you just want to keep them watered well, and the water soluble will be just fine. So these are endives. We're going to pop that out. Since I'm going to be growing these to a larger size, I'm going to remove one of them. And I'm just going to pull it out. I hate doing that, but you have to. Loosen up the root ball. Just going to drop this in right here, covered to the same depth that it was in the seed cell. Press it in, and then we'll come back and we'll water it in afterwards. A couple of tips. When you're growing transplants in August, you know, you're getting 90-degree days. You don't want these cells baking in the sun, you know, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They'll overheat, they'll dry out, it can cause these to bolt early. I recommend if you're going to be growing these outdoors, and the reason that you grow transplants is maybe you don't have space, maybe it helps you with getting a harvest earlier to your table, but these are going to germinate, typically when it's warm, anywhere from 5, 7, 8 days. They can stay in here a good 3 weeks, get to size, get them in as transplants. But I recommend giving them morning sun, something when the sun comes out, you know, 8 a.m., 7 a.m., and maybe till 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and then shade should come over here. Keep this plastic cool. They're going to grow better that way. If you really do, and I just want to stress again, if you have these sitting in the sun 10 to 12 hours, they may not even germinate. They may germinate, then dry out and die off. You really have to manage the heat when you're doing this August into the fall. In the spring, you can let these sit out. They're going to love that extra warmth and the extra sunshine. And a couple tips too. When we're planting now, August, September, it's warm. So most of your seeds are going to germinate 5, 7, 8 days, something like that. They should definitely germinate within 10 days. When the soil is cold and you're doing this late winter, early spring, it can take 10, 14, even 21 days for seeds to germinate. So doing transplants in the spring is sometimes more important than doing them in the summer, late summer, early fall. Because if you just put in the seeds, they germinate real quickly, they grow, and you can save yourself that step. So the next bunch we're putting in is right over here. That's a good, I don't know, at least 8, 10 inches apart. That will give them the size. I'm going to pop this out. This cell just dried up a little bit. So what I'm going to do here, let me bring this down, is there's 3 plants. Whatever 2 look the best in about 10 days, I'll keep those and I'll remove the other one. And I'm just popping this in, pressing it in, and then I'm going to have 2 endives here. They're going to get to a bigger size. If I wanted them to just get to the full size, I would just keep 1 plant. And the reason, I'm kind of wishy-washy on that, it really depends on what you want to grow. There's no perfection. Check the back of the seed packs. That's about the only good information they have on the spacing. In some cases they say make a row 24 inches apart. That's really wide. At the most I would say 12 to 18 inches, depending on what type of variety of plant you're growing and how wide it's going to get. You can just pack these in here a little bit more and then just take the leaves as you need them, and it makes a beautiful salad. So in the next group, I'm going to go over about a shovel's length. Let me make sure that's in view. And we're going to put it right in here. Loosen up the soil. And then I'm just going to pop out one of these leafy, loose leaf lettuces. So this is endive. This is the loose leaf lettuce. I don't want this one. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to have 2 plants. That guy looks kind of weak. I'm just going to get rid of it. So let's have 1 plant there. Drop it in, press it in, and then we're going to put the other one right in there. You get this out of the way. And that'll just get dropped in there. And here we have a combination of, one of the endives got over there. I know that endive will smother this lettuce, so I'm going to get rid of that. 2 loose leaf lettuces pressed in there, and then we'll get to watering and fertilizing at the end of the video. That's nice. I mean, that's going to be a lot of leafy greens. The next setup is for direct seeding. And the soil here is just dry. I cleaned it up a couple days ago. When you're direct seeding, an important tip is you want to make sure it's going into the soil, not into mulch. The mulch can kind of challenge the plants for nitrogen. I can actually take some of this mulch, put it around the transplants. They already have root systems in there, not waiting for them to germinate, not worried that the mulch is going to smother the seed. So you want to clear back any mulch that you have, and then put down a good amount of compost just across the top. Something like this. Once the compost is down, we're just going to gently loosen the soil to, I don't know, 2-4 inches deep. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular. We're just mixing in the compost. Plenty of nutrients already in here. Compost will help hold water. And we're just setting up this planting area. Smooth everything out. And what I like to do, keeps it really simple. Any big clumps just break up, because I just like to do planting holes. So we're going to do spinach here, and spinach is actually about 6 inches for full size. So 4 to 6 inches apart, 1/2 inch deep, not more than that really. It'll look something like that. And then we're going to drop 2 spinach seeds in there. And then on the other side, we're going to do lettuce. I'm going to do about 6 inches for that too. Full size usually for lettuce might be 8 inches or 10 inches, but I want this nice red leafy lettuce to kind of fill in this space. And again, I'm just going to take the leaves as I want. These are the spinach seeds, and I'm going to put 2 or 3 per hole and just drop them in. Again, the holes maybe 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch deep. 2 or 3 seeds per hole. You can thin them down based on how you want to grow them. The more seeds that you have in a space, the smaller the plant might be. And actually 4 seeds fell in there, and I'm not going to worry about that. I always do recommend put in some more seeds. You can always remove them. You get so many seeds per package that you really have extra. I mean, they're going to last a long, long time. And just a tip too, sometimes on the back of the seed pack it says good through 12/24. Seeds can last 3, 5, 7 years, so you don't have to buy new seeds every year. Let me open this pack real quick. The the red loose leaf lettuce. This is Marvel of 4 Seasons. I really like it because it's just a beautiful red leaf and it looks good in the salad bowl. So I'm going to take 2 or 3 seeds, drop them in to each hole. And just this quick, we have 5 planting holes of lettuce, 5 planting holes of spinach. And what you might want to do, it depends on how much lettuce and leafy greens you're going to eat. You know, maybe you do 6, 8 in the lettuce row, 6, 8 in the spinach row. You wait 2 or 3 weeks for them to be growing and germinate, and then you plant again. You just don't want to do a row of, say, 100 seeds, and then they all mature at once and you can't eat everything quickly. So by doing kind of a succession, you know, whatever, 15, 20, 25 planting holes, wait 2 or 3 weeks after germination, another 15, 20, 25 planting holes, that'll be perfect. You'll get a continuous supply of lettuce. This setup here is for greenhouse plastic to go over this space and keep these warmer so I can grow deeper into the fall and into the winter here. So again, please subscribe. I'll show you how I do this. So this is all being set up. You saw the leafy greens that we're going to harvest in a second that I started back in July, and I actually used shade cloth to keep them cooler. Well, these are going in later, and then the plastic's going to go over these so that I can grow further into the winter. And then once you're done, you're just covering them over, and then we will water them in. We'll water everything in at the end of the video. We're going to harvest some of the red sales lettuce, and you can see it's a loose leaf lettuce, really dense. So one of the pests that you can end up getting are snails and slugs. So I recommend using a snail and slug bait with iron phosphate or sulfur in there. Check out my Amazon shop, it will link to that. And you basically scatter that down broadly all over the place. You only have to do that every 3 to 4 weeks, and that will really keep the snail and slug population under control. But when it starts getting dense like this, they kind of hang out in there. So for harvesting, we wouldn't take this group. We will go right into the middle, and I'm just going to cut the bottom off, get rid of whatever you don't want. That's going to go into the sieve, and then we're going to cut one up back here, and that opens up some space in there. There's some flies flying around and like that, but by opening up the space, now we have sunlight coming in here, and that's going to reduce any of the population of insects that are in there, especially the snails and slugs. But just by cutting every other group, you open up the space, and then now these can get larger. Spinning around to this side, I'm going to take some of the endive, and I'm just going to take this one. There's 2 plants in there like we did earlier with the transplant, and I'm just going to take all that, leave the roots in there. The romaine is just not quite ready yet. I want that to get bigger, and I've spaced it more so they can get larger. They're a little more shaded in there so they're not growing as well, but that's taking one of the endives out. After you cut something like this, hit it with a little bit of water-soluble fertilizer. That will help bring the leaves back quicker, and you can keep these going until you get a hard freeze and everything dies out. But this is what we have so far. Let's go over to the green stalk tower and take some of the leafy greens out of there. We're going to add in some more endive. I just watered these plants, and we'll talk about watering too. For your transplants and your seed starts or your direct seeded lettuces and spinach, it's really important to keep them watered. And then we're going to take some of this butter crunch. You know, if you don't get all the leaves, just leave them in there. And that's plenty of lettuce to make a salad for tonight. Before hitting your transplants or the seed you direct sow with the water soluble, just soak them down really well with water. Now, when you're doing this spring, well, late winter, early spring into early summer, you don't have to water as often. But when you're doing this later July, August, September, in some areas, the hot sun can dry this out really quickly. And remember that the transplants only have a tiny root ball. So even though everything is soaked around here, the roots aren't getting to that water. So you really want to water these really every other day and make sure they have enough water for a good 10 to 14 days till the root systems are well established. Once you water them in, you can go ahead and hit them with the water-soluble fertilizer. I recommend AgroThrive. You can find them in my video description. They're a wonderful organic fertilizer. But you can use any fertilizer, anything that fits your budget, anything that you want to use. You don't need to over-soak these, so I just want to show you. Quick hit, water-soluble, 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 water-soluble. That's all they really need. When you cut these back for the first time, hit them again with the water-soluble. But you don't need to be feeding these every week. For the seedlings, or for the seeds, just a quick water like that. That is plenty of nutrients to grow your lettuces. If you're able to, getting compost in there makes all the difference. All right, let's go to the other lettuces that we cut. So let's first hit the lettuces we cut. They're going to get a good drink, something like that. That will get them growing again. And then the endive over here. Now if you want, maybe you feel like your plants need a feeding. When you get to a size like this, you know, halfway to their full size, just hit them real quick, and that is plenty of fertilizer. And again, you don't have to overdo it. You don't have to worry about doing this, you know, every week, 2 or 3 times a month. This is basically all I do, and I always get beautiful leafy greens. When growing in vertical towers or containers, that's a different beast. Plants really do suck the nutrients out of that soil. So I recommend watering your containers, your vertical towers, watering those plants once a week, something like that, with your water-soluble fertilizer. You can give them a little more. I mean, if you want to give the plants 3 seconds, 5 seconds, once a month, I think I just said once a week, I would do this once a month, really does make a difference. And what happens is because you have a limited amount of soil nutrients in there, if you were already growing other, say, warm weather crops or crops in your container mix, it really depletes the soil. So watering them, let me be clear again, once a month with a water-soluble fertilizer really does make a difference. All right, now let's talk about watering and we'll finish up. Watering, of course, is very important, and it's even more important for your leafy greens. If you really want them to thrive and grow, you have to water a little bit more than you probably think. They are 80–90% water. They're made up of mostly water. When you're growing again from late winter, early spring, into late spring, early summer, you don't have to water as often. It may be, and it's hard for me to say because it's all going to depend on where you live, but in the springtime when it's cooler, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. In the summer, if you start in late July, August, even early September, you may have to water, if it's hot in your area, especially when it's staying in the 90s, 4 or 5 times a week. You really want to soak them in, and it's just something like this. I'm going to do this in real time. You want a lot of water. You really want the water to soak down deeply so that the roots can get that. If you get a hot day, like 90 degrees, and that top 2 inches dries out, you know you have a lot of water down deep in the soil and your root systems can get in there. Now that being said, that's for well-established leafy greens. They can access the water, all this water that you see floating around. They can access that because they've been in here a while and the roots have spread out. When you put in seedlings, your transplants, or you direct seed, when the temperatures are 80–90 degrees, you may have to water every day just to keep that top 1 or 2 moist. You don't want these to germinate. You get a hot day, top 2 inches of your soil dries out, kills off your germinating seeds. Now that was a little harsh, but something like that really. Don't want to blast the plants, but really soak it in. This is a nice deep watering. This is what your leafy greens are going to love. I'll talk about the shade cloth, why do you use it, how do you use it in about a minute. Your leafy greens, and what we're talking about today really is lettuce, spinach, arugula, and endive. Kale and collards and other leafy greens are grown a little bit differently, but this is the general category. This is generally how I grow all of them, so you can just, you know, mix and match as you wish. Your leafy greens love 75-degree days, 55-degree nights. They can take a frost, and they grow beautifully. If you're going to try and grow deeper into the summer, from late spring into the summer, or you're going to start early like I did with the group back there, this way I get a harvest sooner to the table, you're going to have to use shade cloth, especially when the days are in the upper 80s and the 90s, when the nights are in the upper 60s and 70s. It's really warm, so your leafy greens often don't form nice heads, or they don't grow really big because it's so warm. They send out a flower stalk, it's called bolting, and they go to flower and produce seed. By using a shade cloth, and the back end is usually tied up, I just don't need to do that now because we have those 75-degree days, 55-degree nights. You can take a shade cloth and I just tie it to some posts or to my fence, and then the other corner would be tied up right in there, just something like that. This cools the soil down, which cools the roots down, which keeps the plants from bolting, and you can really grow those 4 crops well into the summer, and you can start early. Like I started July 15th with some of these. Once the temperatures start dropping, you remove the shade cloth, you're good to go. I have shade cloth linked in my Amazon shop in the video description. This is a 70% shade cloth, blocks out a lot of the sun, lets in 30% of the sun. You can really get away with a 50% shade cloth if you're not sure what to get. That will reduce the sun and the heat by 50%. It's not so much the ambient temperature around the plants, it's how hot that soil heats up. When the summer sun is hitting your soil, it can heat that top couple inches up to 100, 110, even 120 degrees. And that is just too warm for your leafy greens. So to grow spring and then in the summer, you use the shade cloth. From the summer into the fall, you use the shade cloth, and then you remove the shade cloth. So you can grow leafy greens really spring, summer, and fall. And if you want to subscribe, follow me. I'll be showing you how I grow into the later fall and into the winter by setting up some stronger structures to keep the heat in. I'll be doing that because yes, they can take a frost, but when you start getting hard ground freezes, you want to protect the ground from freezing, and you can keep those leafy greens going. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. And again, please subscribe. I'll show you how to grow food, have some fun, and save money. And now that we're in the fall, we just don't need the shade cloth anymore. Thanks for watching.